Hey, it's Courtney Barriger, your host of Environmental Style Now, the A to Z podcast on all that is sustainable fashion. Before we jump into the show, we need to address what's happening on the world stage. After hundreds of years of racist legislative agendas, we as a country are once again looking into the mirror to see how racial inequality has morphed from slavery to Jim Crow laws and into its latest incarnation, the prison industrial complex. Hopefully, this time, those of us who live in privilege will educate ourselves and take real action so that racial inequality, injustice, and police brutality can be a thing of the past. There are several great documentaries that you can check out. More on that at the end of the podcast. And there are also countless nonprofits that you can donate to in support of Black Lives Matter. Do your part. Don't just take photos. Now is the time for action. On this episode of ES Now, we are with 7-year eco-fashion expert and PR director of Fairtrade USA, Casey Martin, to discuss regulation in the fashion industry, COVID-19 fashion, and the future generation of buyers. I'm Courtney Barriger, and this is ES Now. Today, we're with our guest, Casey Martin, who's the head of public relations at Fairtrade USA and the founder of the eco-ethical fashion site, The Peahen. She works at the intersection of social change and style and likes to say that she's writing sustainable fashion into action. She's one part journalist, one part stylist, and fuses the two in her work and advocacy. Let's jump right in. Tell me a little bit about your background in eco-fashion and what drew you to it.
Yeah, so I got my start in eco-fashion kind of in a roundabout way. In school, I had studied kind of two diametrically opposed things. I was in the College of Journalism and Communications, pursuing that because I knew I had multiple interests, but I was specializing kind of in fashion on the side by working at boutiques or doing internships in the fashion industry, working at a local fashion week when I was in Florida, and then moving to Milan for a little while to study abroad, and that was in fashion journalism. I was kind of baked in the world of luxury fashion, and that's what I was attracted to. But then at the same time, I was doing minors in sustainability and human rights in this program that was social change communication. So how do you rally people around change, right? Change that is important to the world and that protects the globe in a way that's sustainable. And when I say sustainable, I don't just mean environmental. I mean sustainable livelihoods that protect and ensure human rights. When I graduated, I went to go intern and then work for a PR firm in New York City. And that is kind of where I had my aha moment of this is not really the type of industry I want to be dedicating my time or talent into. And that, of course, is, one for personal reasons of just like, I don't see myself working my way up in this field on a basis of talent. It was very grueling and underpaid, and that kind of documentation is pretty wide. But then there was a day when one of our accounts was for Christopher Kane. And so he's a couture designer, and he's famous for these jelly dresses. If you look them up, if you just look up Christopher Kane jelly dresses, they come up. They're very like 90s style where you can touch them and they have liquid inside. They're amazing. But one of them like burst in the mail, and it was, couture down. It was probably upwards of $20,000. And I remember the director of the firm getting really angry, and the whole situation just made me think, what is this garment made of? And then it led me into the rabbit hole of like all these plastics that things are made of are from petrochemicals. And so I'm learning about sustainability, but I'm working in an industry, and it slapped me in the face. Wow, this is an incredibly unsustainable industry. And this was kind of on the precipice of fast fashion and people starting to call fast fashion out, but that hadn't happened. And I think when you look at millennials, we were kind of the prime offenders of fast fashion. We sort of started that, but then we rallied against it when we found out how egregious it was. So anyways, I worked for a little while in that firm, and then I just moved back home and took a general marketing job. But that's when I was like, what can I do to help change the fashion industry? And I decided to found my site. It was called The Peahen. So this was probably 2014 that I started it. And I just started writing investigative pieces on like, is Anthropologie ethical? Is this brand ethical? What's the difference between artisan made and fair trade? And it led me into a world of ethics where I could fuse my journalism background with reporting and trying to help change the industry. So kind of as the years evolved and I had that business, it morphed into multiple things. As I was writing, brand collaborations started to happen. I moved my business to Austin, Texas, which happens to be a city that has a stronger affinity and appetite for sustainable living and sustainable, not so much fashion, but we were kind of a nascent market for indie design, and there was a lot of promise here. So when I moved to Austin, it morphed into more speaking opportunities to really bring that message out. And I got passionate about consulting one-on-one with people and really working with them to like hone their wardrobe. So that turned into styling. So I was doing some styling for magazines. I was taking people on tours around Austin of the ethical and independent brands that were around here and teaching them how to build more sustainable wardrobes, curating vintage. So like kind of trying to touch on every facet of sustainable fashion. And I loved it. So that was kind of how I morphed into the world. Had that business for about 6 years. And then I wanted to join a bigger mission, right? I had never worked in the nonprofit space, and I thought that was my next phase of why don't I go, be the head of PR at a firm that is either championing sustainable fashion or a nonprofit working in that space. And I happened to be speaking at a fair trade conference in Austin as an influencer. So how can brands and how can fair trade companies work with influencers? And was approached by someone at Fair Trade USA to do some content writing, but I was like, actually, I would like to work for you full time. And that's how that career shift happened. I moved out to the Bay Area for a while and then eventually came back to Austin. And now I'm kind of more embedded in fashion supply chain. So learning about the fair trade factory standards, but then also super embedded in other supply chains. So we're famous for coffee and cocoa. Those are our core products, but we have hundreds of thousands of products in our portfolio, everything from quinoa to like baking supplies to textiles. So it's just been, I told you at the beginning of our call, I feel like we've worked every day and I've read a whole book. It's incredibly, incredibly challenging and exciting to be part of fair trade.
Wow. What are some practices that fair trade has set up?
Yeah, so kind of how it works. Fair trade gets thrown around pretty loosely as a term. Someone can say, oh, this is fairly traded, but what does that really mean? So there's about 3 certification bodies in the world of fair trade, which means like this was audited by a third-party standard, and Fair Trade USA is one of them. We have the majority of the market in the United States. Artisans and workers, farmers and fishermen are all over the globe, but we are more focused market-wise, consumer market-wise in the United States. So when we say something is fair trade certified, it means that it's gone through a rigorous set of standards. For instance, in the agricultural industry, there's over 200 compliance standards that a farm would have to go through to get certified. And then what's really powerful about fair trade is, in addition to the like compliance and auditing, we have community development funds. So how those function is every brand that is paying into the fair trade system. So say it's a Driscoll's who supplies dairy for a bunch of mass retailers like a Kroger or something like that, or a Costco, they would pay additional money on top of whatever the wage is provided for in our standard to these community development funds, and they're different for every single farm or factory, and they elect a body to use the funds. So say that, there's 70% women at that farm, the elected body would have to be representative of that, and they vote on how to use the funds. So funds typically get used for everything from like building sanitation wells, or in Mexico, they built a taqueria because the women, in order to work more, they needed to have readily accessible food to take home so they can pick up pre-made tacos on their way home. So they're just using really creative and inventive ways. Especially right now amid COVID, our team is taking a bunch of calls with all the workers to figure out like how do we make those, sometimes we call them premium dollars, but how do we take those community development funds and make them more agile so they can be used for medical supplies or anything that would help that community stay safe and stay protected amid a massive pandemic.
Do you have any examples of what might apply to fashion when it comes to compliance standards?
Yeah, so we're regulating everything from like working hours, how long they're on the floor, health and safety hazards, so chemicals. We regulate, there's, that depends on the factory. It depends on the type of thing that's being produced, but no toxic chemicals, no harmful chemicals. There's lines in there for freedom of association to make sure workers have access to bargaining wages. All of that kind of stuff is regulated as it pertains to health and safety.
And when it comes to the fashion industry, has anything changed since the pandemic began?
The biggest change that we've seen, and it's really unfortunate, is brands canceling orders. So, and I don't have enough information yet to say if our brands have. I don't believe they have. But for instance, brands that have lost business because people are not shopping retail really right now are pulling their contracts, especially in Bangladesh, where labor is already pretty cheap, very cheap, way below standards. And it's unfortunate because that leaves them without any income, and they're already living on the edge. So right now we're in talks with all the factories, all of our brand partners to urge them not to cancel orders and to pursue other creative ways, right? Like you can put money in escrow. There's ways that you can extend lines of credit. You can at least fulfill the orders that you have, keep those going. So kind of the same thing I talked about with the community development funds, figuring out how those funds can be applied right now in times of crisis to keep workers protected in the factories as well as the farms. And then garment workers who are already living on the edge are out of work, out of a job, can't provide any livelihood, and they're already struggling. We need to work bilaterally too, right? Like governments in those countries have to intervene. They have to help provide aid. There have to be lines of credit extended. But in a way, the businesses play a role too in letting the workers know they're not abandoning them and that they value them.
What is happening right now in the global south? I mean, are people starving because they can't go to work?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say like maybe they're starving yet, but it could happen, right? If they don't have their wages. So if you lose your wages, then, and they're already at risk, that is a very real scenario.
So scary.
Yeah, it's really scary. I'll send you some articles. I actually recommend following the Business of Fashion on this. So they have a post, I forget what it's called, but if you go on Business of Fashion and you like look up, garment workers COVID, they're tracking all of the news stories that are coming out daily on this. So you can keep up to date on like how it's affecting them. On a brighter note, though, I feel like we can't not talk about like quarantine style.
Yeah, let's talk about quarantine style.
I'm curious. I have been trying to shop like a little bit online just to be like, okay, like let me, shop some indie brands or like buy something. But I'm curious to know like what you're wearing day to day, like how you're structuring your clothing during quarantine.
Oh, for me, the honest truth is that I end up wearing the same outfit maybe 3 days in a row because I'm not seeing anyone. So I just don't really, I don't really care unless I'm, taking photos or I'm, talking to someone on FaceTime, then I feel like I need to change my shirt, but, at least have the appearance of having my life together. But what's the point,
I feel the same way. I've actually been buying more like beauty products and like getting more into eco beauty. So buying nail polish, and I bought some like natural temporary hair dye today because I was like, that's fun. Like that's one way I can occupy my time at home with that. Like, oh, I'll dye my hair today and it looks different, because there's no need for me to really like buy new clothes right now. I'm not actively selling vintage. But yeah, I mean, as far as like day to day, I have my like 3 shirts that I keep on a hanger next to where my computer is. put those on over like whatever the tank top is I woke up in, and I'm like, okay, they think I look put together.
Oh, the whole world is living like this right now. It's pretty amazing. So it looks like consumer habits when it comes to buying are changing too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Have you noticed anything different about our generation, like millennials' buying habits right now?
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I mentioned our generation, right? Generation Y. I think we're still coming off fast fashion. So we kind of started that. Like I remember shopping Forever 21 so much when I was in high school and college, because that was what was there, and we didn't know what we didn't know. But now that we're armed with information, millennials really care. And we have more spending power right now, so we can make change. I think the trends I'm seeing with millennials are like, we're the nostalgic buyers of vintage. We started like the normcore thing. We love the 90s. And I think that is kind of surging. And we're looking for a more curated experience. So right after fast fashion, you had the like Maria Kondo trend that turned on. And I think people went very minimal. But what I've seen in recent years is, we want to be fun again. We want color. We want pizzazz. And I think we have this affinity to be unique and reestablish our identity. So we are the buyers more of the independent brands and brands that like someone else might not know about.
Do you think that with COVID-19 happening, that our buying habits will change after stores are reopened?
That's a good question. I think we have to be careful with it. I think we might fall into this, oh my gosh, I want to go on a shopping frenzy, because I think a lot of people, maybe if you have income right now, if you're working in tech, you still have your job, you're taking advantage of some of the sales that are going on. But for the most part, like I saw a funny article the other day that was like, t-shirt sales are surging at Walmart, right? Because people are only buying tops because they're on video conferences all day, and like no one's buying pants anymore. And I'm like, there's truth in that. But as far as like the macro trend of how we're going to emerge from this, honestly, I don't know. We could go a little crazy and shop a ton, but I don't know. I can't really predict the future on that one.
Right. It's still
all I'll say is that it's just, if we do start shopping more, we should be conscious about waste and what's going to happen with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with everyone being at home right now, I wonder if online sales are just going to become so much more normal.
I think they will. And it's, for me, speaking from a personal standpoint, that is predominantly how I shop, unless I'm going in to get something that like needs to be tailored or custom fit, or I'm shopping for vintage for my curation in my business, then I'm going to thrift stores. But the majority of my clothing I buy online. I think that just is the way it is. But then if this pandemic lasts, we're dealing with another issue of, are you okay to be shipping boxes? Because there's all this research coming out now where you need to leave them outside your door. And is it really ethical for this person to be working in a fulfillment house to get that to you? You know, so I think there's just so many evolving things that we haven't even thought about that the pandemic's going to create ripple effects in.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Especially if you're doing something like ThredUp, if you want to sell clothing too, if you want to work with thrift stores, how do you do that safely right now?
Yeah. So I love the question about ThredUp because I looked into their policy the other day when I was curious about it. And the only thing I saw in their policy about COVID is that they extended their return window. So like their thing is called a goodie box, was extended from 14 to 21 days. So they're just giving themselves a little bit more time to ship things. With the slowdown, it probably means that they are short-staffed, right? But their distribution centers are up and running. They're still working. So, and they're saying they're following like a CDC guidance on sanitizer and all of that. And for me, it's like, well, okay, garment workers overseas are still working too, because they have to. People still have to make a living. So I would say in cases like this, the burden is almost on us as a consumer to exercise caution, right? Like, and act judiciously. So researching like what the half-life is of COVID, the science is evolving every single day. So oftentimes I read articles and it's like, we don't really know yet. So maybe you should wait 4 days with your package outside. And now it's 2. So it really changes and you have to stay fresh. They're saying like 24 hours on cardboard and 72 on plastic and steel, but it's worse if it's wet. So I would just say keep up with it. And like, if you feel that your spending habits or your purchases are going to put someone else's life at risk, even if that company is still functioning, even if that company is saying they're working within CDC guidelines, don't do it. Like, if you feel that your ethics are different than that, I would say go with the science and go with what your gut is telling you.
Where should we turn right now to purchase clothing during the quarantine?
Yeah. Small independent brands. To be honest, like, they're the ones who are struggling most. Like, I think people are still shopping online at like Target and Walmart and like buying stuff there. I know I'm personally getting targeted by a ton of like workout brands and brands who are smart and they're pivoting to like loungewear on Instagram. So it might be smart to start shopping via Instagram because it seems like brands are really evolving there. But I would say look into your city and like look into maybe like an ethical directory or like a local brand directory in your city and reach out to them. I used to help found this collective here called the Conscious Crowd in Austin, this collective of ethical brands, and they just did a live sample sale. So they were planning a sample sale in the city, but shifted it to live, and they went on Instagram, and then you could purchase via the like live videos, and it was great. So I bought a few like jewelry items that way because those are really the businesses that struggle to get to market because they tend to be doing like pop-ups or community events because they don't have brick and mortar. So seek out those businesses and support them as much as you can.
Yeah. And when things go back to normal, what are some alternative ways that we can buy better?
Yeah. Doing your research, joining organizations like Fashion Revolution, Remake Our World, checking out the fair trade brands that are in the system. I mean, I would say like, if you step back and you look at your own habits, because that is the biggest way to reduce your environmental impact. So like, go inside and do an audit. And I love to say, like, I use the acronym ASSIST, like assist the world by re-examining your wardrobe. And for me, what that stands for is like, A is look at what you already have. S is secondhand, shopping secondhand. So going to a vintage store, going on apps like Depop or Poshmark. Those are really awesome peer-to-peer vintage exchange and secondhand exchange sites. The third S is swap. So you can have a clothing exchange with your friends. It turns into a party. You can drink a little bit and exchange clothes. Those are really fun. And then I is for indie. So that's your independent and local designers. So this is where you get into like buying new, right? And then the other S is for so mend something that you already have. And then T is traditional. So traditional fashion outlets like, you know, your Target or a mass retailer would be your last bet if you absolutely can't find something that you need. Like personally, I still shop mass retail for like basic t-shirts and things like that. I'll try to opt for organic when I can, but I'm buying these things with more frequency that, that's not a place in my wardrobe where I've gotten to conversion yet.
Wow. Assist. Can you go over it one more time?
Yeah. Okay. So A is already have, S is secondhand, S is swap, I is indie, S is so, and T is traditional.
That's amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a cool list. I think I can memorize that.
Yeah. There you go. Assist the world with your shopping habits. And then I would just say, like, even if you don't, like, say this is so much of a burden for you, or you can only do like the A for right now because you're inundated with tons of other stuff, like try to read and just put pressure on the system. So like send a tweet to a brand and just like be curious and ask them like, hey, do you have a transparent supply chain? Do you publish your supplier list? Can you show me your CSR policy? And just get curious. I think that's a great first step too.
And I'm curious about what you think about the future. Do you have a positive outlook on the future and our buying habits as a culture, or do you think that we need a lot of work and we need to make more commitments?
I think it's both. I mean, I think it's personally, I have to remain positive, because if not, I look at the data. I'm a data person, and I get really bleak and sad. But there are amazing things to be celebrated in this industry. Like, one thing I am really keen on is fashion technology and how that's being used. It's not super accessible to the mainstream consumer right now, but it will be, in 20 years. And how these things are kind of launching is in collaboration with a big brand. There's a company called Bolt Threads, right? And they make silk from spiders. They make leather from mushrooms. Like, it's very, very innovative. And so they'll kind of launch into the market with a single brand partnership. They did a dress, like Stella McCartney did a dress with their spider silk, and it was at the MoMA for a long time on display. So that's how those things will kind of take off. There's another company called Pangea that's combining natural botanical dyes from plant sources, and then they're like putting in antibacterial properties into them so they stay fresher longer, so you have to wash them less, because the majority of our impacts actually comes in the washing phase of our clothing. So I think we have to fuse this kind of knowledge and consumer awareness, and just also the lack of understanding about recycling. I think once that comes up, it will help the industry. But the biggest impact is in the design phase. About 60% could be offset if we design products better. The buzzword around all of this is designing things in a circular fashion, which means something can either be designed and built to last, or it can return to the earth as a nutrient. And right now, the process that we have is built on recycling, which is actually downcycling. And so these things kind of just degrade the environment. And then a lot of fashion can't even be recycled because we don't have the technology to separate the fibers. So I think that is probably our most pressing challenge when it comes to fashion that concerns me the most. And then, of course, the ethical treatment of people is very, very, very concerning. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the future like if we don't change our buying habits?
If we don't change our buying habits, I mean, it's kind of the same thing when it comes to climate change. If we don't fix these like systemic issues, the lack of recycling, the lack of forethought and design, the human rights atrocities, it's going to be grave on so many levels. Massive waste piling up, dumping wars between countries. I mean, we dump our waste on developing nations, and that is going to have ripple effects in the future. It's not something that is sustainable. Lots of emissions, toxic waste coming into our water and causing diseases, and then exploitation and death, right? Like we've already seen death as a result of how our clothes are produced. The Rana Plaza factory collapsed in Bangladesh and killed thousands of workers, right? Because they didn't have proper fire codes. So when someone goes in and audits and certifies a factory, we make sure that it has fire codes, it has safety codes. So just making sure that people have baseline safety and human rights and access to a living wage, those are all things that are necessary for us to start changing together.
And what are some brands out there that are leading the way?
Yeah, I mean, Patagonia, I think, is, for me, it's not a high fashion brand, it's an outdoor wear brand, but they are so thoughtful in their approach to clothing, right? Like they have instructed consumers in the past, like, don't buy this if you don't need it. Have a repair wear vehicle that drives around and does pop-ups and will repair your clothes for you. They have a whole other like site. So it's like Patagonia Worn Wear, where you can buy reused garments that they have quote unquote rescued. So I think that honestly, they are one of the most innovative companies known to man. I mentioned Bolt Threads, these companies that are on the precipice of fashion technology, I think are really going to help, because what will happen is traditional brands can then buy that technology and integrate the fabrics, like, you know, the spider silk, into their collections. So that's what I'm really encouraged by.
If you could if you could choose a sustainable and ethical brand that has just loungewear, I mean, do those exist?
Ooh. Oh, that's a good question. I actually asked, I think, for this on Instagram the other day, and I was like, who knows sustainable loungewear? I'm sure that I probably have a guide on the PN about this, and I haven't been as active in that business with being at Fair Trade. I'm going to look for you right now.
Hey.
Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, I'm looking on here, and honestly, like, one popped into my mind that might be good. It's called Encircled. And they're all about like this dress that you can wear a bunch of different ways. So I can imagine that would be amazing. And it's artisan made. So you could just be in the same thing over and over again, just pin it a different way or style it a different way. I did a collaboration with them. I think that would be a great thing to be wearing right now. And it's made from like, gosh, is it like tencel? So it's really soft and drapey and like easy to be in. Girlfriend Collective, I think, would be an awesome brand where you could like do a 30-minute like live stream yoga and then work in the same outfit. Maybe even Space Range probably has some cool stuff. And Naja, Naja, they used to do lingerie, but I think they jumped into sleepwear too. Well, it looks like bras, underwear, swim, and sail. But I mean, that was kind of a fun time to update your underwear. And yeah, Base Range would be a good one. Base Range would be really good.
Super cool. Yeah, especially for right now, it's good to know what to invest in. If you're investing in comfort, make it sustainable.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think about if you were to purchase something from ThredUp or Poshmark? Would you do the same sort of policy of letting it sit outside for 24 hours and then like washing it in like a super hot laundry machine? Like what's the method?
Mm-hmm. I've been leaving all my boxes. So I'm still getting some things on Amazon that I like can't find at the supermarket, or if I need to, I'm like, I'm bored, I'm going to like update something in my house. I'll get it on Amazon and I leave it outside for 2 days, sometimes 3. And then when I bring it in, like I order a towel or something and I wash that immediately. So I guess I'm less concerned for like what's inside the box, but I should be. But I feel like if I've left it outside for 3 days, it's okay. My takeout food, I've been trying to like order takeout to support some of the local restaurants here in Austin. And I bring those in, immediately wash my hands, take the food out, replate it, heat it up, throw all of the containers away or recycle them because I like don't want to touch those because they've been touched by someone else. And my mom got on me the other day because she's like, Casey, you're ordering salads, like you shouldn't be ordering any raw food. Mm-hmm. That rule I haven't really been following. I guess that's kind of negligent, but sometimes I want a salad. So maybe think about ordering like cooked food or something instead of raw.
And if you don't have a microwave, then just reheat it on the stove.
Yeah, I guess. I'm such a microwave person. I could like live off microwave popcorn.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about pretty much every apartment I lived at in LA. There was no microwave in any of them. So
yeah,
city living can be kind of tough. Do you know anything about the younger generation?
Yeah, a little bit. So what I was going to say about Gen X, I don't know a lot about. So Gen X to me is almost like a forgotten generation, even though it's been written about that they're thought of that way. But the trends I see with them is that they're very sophisticated and educated, and they're more loyal. So they tend to still shop at department stores, and they're loyal to brands like a Nike or something like that, like heritage brands. So I don't know that I can speak so much to trends there. Gen Z, they're the social buyers, right? The people who are on TikTok, and they're all about scrunchies and this show euphoria with tons of color, and they're incredibly, incredibly savvy. I think they're going to outsmart all the millennials. But I think what we need to remember about Gen Z is they're the most photographed generation of all time. So that is both something we need to acknowledge and something we need to be cognizant of, because it can really influence their buying habits. They're always going to want, or maybe they might always want new outfits if they're always taking pictures, and they might not want the same clothes to appear in those pictures. So I think they feel a lot of pressure to dress in like new clothes, and they really want to like set themselves apart from the crowd because social media is so saturated. And that's why you're seeing this proliferation of like intense color and like over styling. And that is with Gen Zers. Whereas millennials, we started the craze of, you know, brandless and like no tags and no labels on this. So it's very different. So I think if you combine what's happening with Gen Zers with the rise of sustainable fashion, it's going to be this like really unconventional like mashup that might happen with shopping. So there's going to be a lot of rental, a lot of resale. It's already happening, you know, and they can create a unique look, but it might be something that's used or thrift. We're dealing with a generation that is incredibly savvy and knows how to mobilize and knows how to change things. So that is very encouraging.
So are there any facts about fast fashion that have surprised you along the way?
I mean, in addition to like my personal experience with the Christopher Kane dress and researching petrochemicals and fashion, when I started getting into the data, I was stunned, like absolutely stunned to learn that less than 1% of our clothes get recycled. 1%. And so that kind of goes back to the systems failure of people think they might be donating something to, you know, a retailer like a Goodwill or a Salvation Army, but only 10 to 30% of those clothing donations are actually sold by the charities. A lot are just like packaged in large bales and exported for profit to countries like Russia or Pakistan or India, where they actually end up hurting their economies because then they have the clothes and they're suppressing, you know, like workers who might want to be making clothing there. And it becomes this vicious cycle. So that, and then the fact that we just don't have the technology to take apart clothing and recycle it, it just kind of gets downcycled or used in like packaging or in insulation for a home, but it eventually ends up in a landfill. So that one was astounding to me. I think just the fact that it takes 14 bathtubs full of water to make a single cotton t-shirt is crazy, because a lot of people will be like, natural fibers are the best. And I'm like, but which natural fibers? You know, so like, yes, cotton can be better than a polyester, you know, especially if you're concerned with microplastics shedding into the ocean, but it also has a big environmental footprint when it comes to water, especially if you're not sourcing organic. So that one was shocking to me. And then the fact that 152 million people are affected by child labor globally. That number has to come down. It has to. And just the sheer impact, right? When you talk about fashion, it is a massive sector, and that's why creating change here is so important. It's the second biggest economic activity for intensity of trade in the entire world. So that's crazy. And the majority of what we buy or what we bring into the United States is produced out of the country. Like, kind of said that strange. The majority of apparel sold in the United States is produced outside of our country. So I think it's like over 97%. So we really don't have a lot of production going on here in the U.S. And we really have to be cognizant of like trade regulations and how we're treating garment employees across the world, because we are so globalized and so connected.
I mean, there's nothing sustainable about 97% of manufacturing happening outside of the States.
Yeah, I mean, you can still, like, don't get me wrong, you can source ethically from overseas. Like, there are plenty of factories that have been audited and their compliance is right. So just because I'm saying like 97% is overseas is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that we need to make sure that all of those factories, all that production, all the textile making, even the growing of, you know, flax and linen and cotton is all done in the right way. In a way that respects the environment, in a way that is regenerative, and also respects people who make it. Because, I mean, what other sector do you know that literally goes from the earth? So you're taking, like, it deals with farming, and then it deals with, like, textile assembly and making the textiles. Then it goes into, like, dyeing. Then it goes into, like, cutting and spinning and weaving and trimming. And I'm probably getting some of this wrong because I've never been on the design side of things. And then it goes into like cut and sew, and then it goes into final assembly, and then it gets shipped to the United States. Like, that's an incredibly complicated supply chain. And so this is where we work with brands at Fair Trade, to like help them map and help them understand that. But it's also why we only have a factory certification program, because it took us years to just develop that. But then, the hope eventually is to go into like textile certification, farm level certification, and all of that, but you can only do one thing at a time. So this is why I tell consumers too, like, yes, you want to make sure a brand is being quote unquote ethical, but like cut them a break sometimes, because they can't do every facet of their supply chain all at once. And sometimes there are geopolitical issues that go on in countries that they literally can't control.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I do have one more question. Where can we find you online?
Yeah. So the peahen.com is my site. I'm not as active there anymore just because I'm so embedded in my work in fair trade, but I will write every once in a while. But I would say keep up with me on Instagram. So it's at _Peahen, Peahen. And what I'm kind of doing now while I'm working is just sharing articles about sustainable fashion. I'm pretty active on my Instagram stories. So because I'm not able to write in the capacity that I used to, I tend to share other reporters who are covering sustainable and ethical fashion a lot.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. And
very cool. Well, best of luck with the editing, and keep me in the loop on the book and everything, and stay in touch.
I will. Well, I guess I will talk to you later.
Okay, take care.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Huge thanks to Casey Martin for taking the time to share with us today. Check out Casey's extensive blog on eco-fashion at her website, www.thepeahen.com. As we mentioned at the top of the episode, it's high time we educate ourselves on systemic racial inequality. It's no accident that Black families on average struggle more than white families with incarceration, drug felonies, and have a lesser chance at prosperity. To be in the know, in this episode's webpage, we've included links to some very informative documentaries like The 13th, The Tall Man, The House I Live In, and many, many more. And instead of donating to ES Now this week, consider donating to the NAACP or a Black Lives Matter nonprofit that you support. Also, from our sponsors over at Holding Court, they are donating 30% of sales this month to the NAACP, so you can drop into the shop and shop eco-friendly and also help human rights causes at the same time. It's a win-win. Thank you so much for listening. We greatly appreciate all of our listeners, and if you're feeling extra generous, please subscribe to our podcast. It really does help with our ratings, and it helps get the message of sustainable fashion out. And that's a wrap.
Hi, it's Melissa in Los Angeles. ES Now is a Holding Court production and is produced and written by Courtney Berenger. The music is by Parker Ainsworth, fact-checked by Justin Howard, and a special thanks to Alexander Shuck.